Well, we could soon see a major shift in the Democratic race to the White House. Next week, nearly 700 Democratic delegates are up for grabs in Florida, Illinois, Missouri, North Carolina, and Ohio.
But of the five, Florida could be the most critical in deciding who will become the nominee. Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders fought it out on the debate stage last night in Miami. Clinton was questioned on her trustworthiness and her response to the Benghazi attack.
Both candidates also distanced themselves from President Obama's immigration policy.
I would not deport children. I do not want to deport family members either, Jorge. I want to, as I said, prioritize who would be deported. Violent criminals, people planning terrorist attacks, anybody who threatens us.
I happen to agree with President Obama on many, many issues. I think he's done a great job as President of the United States. He is wrong on this issue of deportation. I disagree with him on that. So to answer your question, no, I will not deport children.
A Washington Post poll just yesterday found that only 37% of Americans consider you honest and trustworthy. Is there anything in your own actions and the decisions that you yourself had made that would foster this kind of mistrust?
When you're in public life, even if you believe that it's not an opinion that you think is fair or founded, you do have to take responsibility, and I do. I am not a natural politician, in case you haven't noticed, like my husband or President Obama. So I have a view that I just have to do the best I can, get the results I can, make a difference in people's lives, and hope that people see that I'm fighting for them and that I can improve conditions.
On the night of the attacks in Benghazi, you sent an email to your daughter, Chelsea, saying that al-Qaeda-like group was responsible for the killing of the Americans. However, some of the families claim that you lied to them. Here's Pat Smith, the Mother Information Officer, Shan Smith.
Hillary and Obama and Panetta and Biden and all of Susan Rice all told me it was a video when they knew it was not the video.
You know, look, I feel a great deal of sympathy for the families of the 4 brave Americans that we lost at Benghazi. And I certainly can't even imagine the grief that she has for losing her son. But she's wrong. She's absolutely wrong.
The American people are never going to elect a president who insults Mexicans, who insults Muslims, who insults women, who insults African Americans.
You don't make America great by getting rid of everything that made America great.
Well, with us now from Washington is Washington Examiner Chief Congressional Correspondent Susan Ferrechio and Washington Post national political reporter Abby Phillip. Susan, we're going to get to you. I want to start with Abby, though. Abby, there was a report in Time magazine that sort of suggested that Clinton was actually shadowboxing Donald Trump during her debate performance. So I want to ask you, what do you think of that idea? She's way far ahead in the delegates. Maybe it's time to look to the fight that's beyond this fight, and that's the fight with the GOP nominee.
Well, I think the Clinton campaign views this as a 2-for-1. On the one hand, they're trying to impress upon Democratic primary voters that the big game here is the fight against Donald Trump, and that it's really important for her to lock this thing up early so that she can move on to that. On the other hand, I think that they're trying to deal with Bernie Sanders directly, but they've realized that it doesn't always work for her to go ahead and attack him. So in some ways, that she's trained her attacks on Donald Trump because that's a unifying factor for Democrats, and it also reminds them that this is the game that they really want to be playing, not something against Bernie Sanders in the primary.
Susan, I want to get your take on it. I know that Hillary Clinton was sort of criticized prior to Michigan for shifting her focus to the national race, and then it seemed like maybe it was a misstep. What do you think? Is she so far ahead that she can really look beyond the next Super Tuesday?
I think on some level she has to.
Yeah, she's got double the delegates that Bernie Sanders has. And the more she wins, the harder it is for him as he goes ahead to become really a viable nominee, because he has to win a greater proportion per state as we move along. And he's not doing that. They pretty much walk away with an even number of delegates from the last contest, even though he had a big victory in Michigan. But I think there's a note of caution for Mrs. Clinton, and I know she's paying attention to this. If you look at what happened in Michigan, the same thing could hold true in Ohio and in Illinois, the two next contests, because of the trade issue. Sanders has been really powerful on trade. It really helped him in Michigan, where people there are still smarting over the North American Free Trade Agreement, which her husband was one of the architects of. And so I think moving ahead, she could run into that same problem on trade in Illinois and in Ohio. And I think the Clinton camp is well aware of this. So as much as they would like to turn to the national election and the general election in November, Sanders isn't going away. He's got a lot of enthusiastic young voters who want to vote for him. She's got a big enthusiasm gap in her side of things. So I think that this moving forward, there are many reasons for Bernie Sanders to stay in. One of them, though, working against him, of course, is that delegate math. He's really far behind. And as we move along in each contest, he needs to even have bigger victories than he's having just to even have a sliver of a chance of beating her at this point.
Abby, Bernie Sanders' campaign manager told our correspondent Nancy Cordes that he'll have an easier road ahead now that the southern states are out of the way. What do you make of that?
To some extent, that's true. I mean, Michigan is in many ways just like Ohio. It's a little bit more similar to Illinois. But then there's North Carolina, and then there's Florida. And Bernie Sanders will also need to do well in those two states. And Hillary Clinton has a pretty significant advantage. In Florida in particular, there are just so many delegates up for grabs in that state. And Bernie Sanders has really not made the kind of inroads that he would need to with Latino voters in order to really blunt what could be about 20 points lead for Hillary Clinton in Florida. So even if he comes out with a win in Ohio and Illinois, the way the delegates work is that he's going to have to really outstrip her by more than 5 points, by 10 points, 15 points, in order to see a significant boost in delegates, which might help him catch up with her.